Hi everyone, the first thing that you're going to need is a thick material. I'm just using like a sweatshirt kind of material, and I'm going to be placing my hand and my arm over top of it and tracing it out with an eyeliner pencil. And because I'm making this for my sister and she has a much smaller hand than mine, I'm just tracing it right around mine because it's big enough. But if you're doing this for yourself, you want to definitely overline your hand at least like a half an inch wider, just to make sure that it fits in the end. If you don't want to make your own glove, you can of course just go buy one and then decorate it, but I wanted mine to be thicker like hers, so I just decided to make my own out of a thicker material. After you've traced out your hand and your arm, you want to sew that with a sewing machine, and I'm just going right along the edges, and you can even go a little bit further out from where you traced just to make sure that it's big enough. When you're sewing the tops of the fingertips, it's important to take your time so that they're rounded. Sometimes you may even need to go over them a few times just to get the right shape, because if you're not careful, they can come out kind of jagged, and that will show when you turn them inside out. After it's sewn together, you can cut it out with some scissors, and be very careful to not like cut too far down in between the fingertips, and make sure that you leave a little bit of fabric over past the seam so that they don't rip. And I would suggest making the glove longer than you think you need, and then you can just put them on and see where the length is, and then just cut off the bottom where the length should be. Once the glove is cut out, you want to try it on and make sure it fits. And again, I'm making this for my sister who has a smaller hand, so it fits more snug on me. But yours shouldn't be that snug, because if it is like this, then it probably won't come off once you paint it and you won't be able to get it back on. So now I'm just taking these hemostats, which are like, I don't know exactly what they're for, but they're like little metal instruments, and you're just gonna pull out the fingertips with them. If you don't have hemostats, you can just use like a pencil or something and push out the fingertips from the inside of the glove. And if you do use hemostats and they don't come out, you can, again, you just use like a pencil or something and push them out. And this is what the glove looks like when it's turned right side out. To make the fingernails, I'm first starting out by cutting 3 strips of aluminum foil, and they don't have to be that big, just make sure that they can fit over top of your fingertips. And then when you have those 3 strips, you just cut them to smaller strips. For the fingertips, I'm going to be using a polymer clay, and this is just like clay you can bake in your oven, and it doesn't matter what color it is because you're just going to paint over it. And I'm just taking the aluminum foil and I'm wrapping it around my finger to kind of act like a cast so that I can just make the fingernail right on top of the foil. And you just want to do this to all 5 of your fingers, and you want to make sure that it's tight, but it's not too tight. It has to come off so that you can put it on a sheet to bake it in the oven. So just take a small piece of polymer clay and kind of make it into a nail shape before you put it on. And then you're just going to stick it right where your nail begins and just mold yourself a long nail. It doesn't have to be super long. She has one glove that has like a longer nail set and then one that has kind of like shorter ones. So I'm making like a medium long nail. If you don't want to use polymer clay for the nails, you can of course just get regular fake long nails and just glue them on top. But I wanted them to be kind of thicker to kind of match the stature of the glove and the rest of the details. So that's why I'm using polymer clay for the nails. And if they are kind of jagged or too thick, it's okay because I'm going to be filing them after they're out of the oven. This is what the nails look like completed, and then for extra detail that she has on her nails, I'm just going to take a regular pen and I'm going to be carving in the like little branch shapes that she has. There's like 2 branch shapes on each side of the nail. Each time you scrape off the clay, it's important to clean off the pen so that that little ball of clay doesn't get into your next little design. That's what that looks like completed, and now you just want to take them off very carefully and make sure you remember what order you had them on, because if you don't, then they won't fit very well. Then just follow the directions on the back of the clay and bake them in the oven until they're ready to be taken out. Moving on to the skull detail that she has on the top of her glove, I'm just using a big piece of foil and I'm tracing my hand over it just to kind of get an idea of how big I should make it. And then I'm going to visualize where the skull would be. So I'm placing my glove over it and just kind of mapping it out in my head where the circle will be. And then I'm going to go with my pen and just draw the circle, and then I'm going to trace the shape. So I'm going to make like the little mouth, and this will be my guide for when I place the clay over top of it. Then with my polymer clay, I'm just going to roll that into a tiny little coil and just move them around so that they're little circles, just to kind of match the design that she has, and just do it like really random, and just make sure that you stay within the guide that you made yourself. And while you're doing this, make sure that you squeeze the pieces of clay together and just kind of like flatten them out together so that they all stick and then they don't fall apart when you take it off after you bake it. Once I got down to the jaw part of the skull, I just looked at the picture and just tried to copy the design as best as I could, because it has a very specific looping design that I tried to replicate. Then for the eye, I took another coil and just shaped out the eye, and it's very, very important that all of these clay pieces are touching so that they don't break apart once you bake them. Then I added the nose, which is like a little square coil, and then I'm just going to fill in the rest of the head and add more layers of coil so that it looks more detailed. Then for the mouth of the skull, I just use a flat piece of clay, and then I cut out the little holes with the open end of the pen, and then I just added more detail with the pen by cutting out in between each hole to make it rounded. Once you're happy with the way the skull looks, just cut out around the foil so that it's like a little square, and then place it over your hand and gently press on it so it kind of has a curved shape to match your hand, and then bake that in the oven as the directions say. And once your little fingernails are done baking, just take them out and gently take them off the foil, and then you can file off any little sharp pieces, and you can also make them sharper by filing the clay. To file it, I'm just using a regular nail file, and to make it go faster you can use like a really abrasive one, and that makes it a lot easier. And this is what these look like once they're all filed. For the next part of the glove, I'm going to be making these little designs that she has on the arm part, and to do that I'm just basically using the same method that I've been using. I'm taking a thick piece of foil and wrapping that around my arm to kind of act as a mold so that I can put the clay over top of it. I just took my clay and rolled it into some bigger coils, and now I'm just pressing it on top of the foil. And don't worry about it being perfect. It's gonna look pretty bad when you start doing it, but you just have to keep going and basically just map out the general shape of it, and then after you've mapped out the shape of it, then you can go in and do some detail work. For the little details, I'm using my pen again, and I'm just going to slide it right on through some of the pieces to kind of look like leaves. And I did the same thing on this little piece here. You just slide it right down gently, and it makes a really cool design. And then just smooth out the rest of the edges of it so that it looks more clean and polished. Because this detail is really thin after you bake it, it will break in half or it'll break somewhere on it, but that's totally okay because you'll be gluing it on top of the arm anyway and you can just glue it back. And once these bake, they are really flexible. Well, they're not really flexible, but they're flexible enough to where you can kind of bend them still and they won't break. But even if they do break, you can just glue them right back on. And then you can just take your scissors and cut down the middle of the back very carefully, and then keep it in that general shape when you bake it in the oven. After it's baked, it's going to be very, very fragile, so be careful. But even if it does break, it's not a big deal because you're just going to glue it on the glove anyway. But just make sure that you know where it broke so that you can put it back together. For the next little details on her fingers, I'm just doing the same exact thing where I put the foil on my fingers and then I'm taking little tiny coils and just coiling on the design until I'm happy with the way it looks. After all your details are baked, you can go ahead and paint them. I'm just using a gray acrylic paint and I'm painting everything front and back. Then for the skull detail, I'm going to be painting it with a darker gray because I want it to have some dimension when I paint over top of it with the silver. Then you can do the same thing with the arm details and just paint them a darker gray because when you paint over it with the silver, it'll give it a lot more dimension. On the glove, I'm just taking the same exact gray acrylic paint and I'm using a very large brush and I'm just going to paint the entire glove with the acrylic paint. Now that the gray paint has dried on my glove, I'm going to be using the Martha Stewart craft paint in metallic silver and I'm just going to paint that over the entire glove, and this is going to add a slight sheen and it'll help the glitter that I'm going to be using stick onto it. And don't use a brush, it'll take way too long. Just rub it in with your other hand and that makes it go a lot quicker. Before the paint is dry, just take your silver glitter and put it all over the glove and then rub it in. And I even went back in with some glue over top of that and added more glitter. This is what the glove looks like once it's painted and glittered, and you just want to take this off and let it dry completely overnight. Using the same metallic acrylic paint, I'm going to be painting the nails completely with it, both top and bottom. For the skeleton, I'm going to lightly brush the silver paint over top of it, and I want to leave the lower parts of the details still dark gray so that it has some dimension. So just use a very little bit of it on your brush and just brush it lightly over top of it. When you do take these finger pieces out of the oven, it's important to label which finger they went on so that you don't get confused and that they fit perfectly on each finger. And then just paint them like the same way with the metallic paint. This is the next day and the glove is completely dry, which is really important because if it's at all a little bit wet, the hot glue will not stick to the details and they'll just fall right off. So I'm just adding the hot glue on and then placing on the little fingernails. You don't need a lot of hot glue for this either. If you use too much of it, then obviously you're gonna have like pools of hot glue. Just add a little bit just so that it sticks. For the finger pieces, I'm doing the same thing. I'm just adding on some hot glue and then pressing them on. And they are actually kind of flexible, so you don't really have to worry about them being too hard and they won't shape to the finger because they do move just a little bit. put some hot glue on the back of the skull, and now I'm just going to place that right in the middle of the glove and then press down to make sure that it is attached. Gluing on the arm piece can be a little bit tricky, but you just want to kind of eyeball where it is in the picture and then place it on. Sometimes it can bend in the oven where it's not the exact shape anymore, but that's totally okay because it is kind of flexible, and even if it does break like you just saw it broke, you can just glue it right back on and you won't even notice. And I even went back after I glued these pieces on and I made some more just to fill it in a little bit more, and then I'm just gonna paint over the little torn pieces. Here's the glove completed. As you can see, it does dry into a solid shape, so you don't even have to wear it if you don't want to. You can just sit it on top of your desk as a decoration, but if you do want to wear it for a costume or something, you totally can. If any of you do end up using this tutorial, please tweet us a picture of it because we would love to see it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and as always, thank you for watching.